So here I am, just thinking about the seventh man and thinking about how to write with evidence. Because when I sit around and think, those are the kinds of things that I think about. So, let us begin. The whole point of today is to continue to practice the skill of using evidence to support our claims about a text. Now, we are reading fictional short stories, and so we are writing about literature, and in a literature class, that's what we do. This skill, though, should still be the same in your science and your history classes, and maybe even in a math class if you ever have to write a paper. And even dance. I know dance has papers that they have to write, and PE sometimes. So the skill is still the same. Whatever the text is, if you have to write about a particular idea that is in that text, write with evidence. So we are looking at the seventh man, and we are looking at how to use quotations to support our ideas and to integrate them well. So first off, we're going to look at this idea of characterization. Describe the main character. And so here I have presented to you just a passage from the text. The seventh man appeared to be in his mid-50s. He was a thin man, tall, with a mustache, and next to his right eye he had a short but deep-looking scar that could have been made by the stab of a small blade. So, one way that you can do that is this. The seventh man was almost 50 years old. The seventh man appeared to be in his mid-50s. He was a tall, thin man, a mustache, and next right eye, blah, 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 blah. That is incorrect. And I'll tell you why it's incorrect. Look, I have, and let's see if I can use this here. I have one sentence, and it ends. And then I have my quotation starting. That is not an integrated idea, because what we're looking for is an integrated idea. We want to bring my sentence together with the quotation. Instead, we have this harsh cut, and it doesn't go together. Okay? So it's wrong. We don't want to do that. Also, look at this. Look how long this section is. Okay? It's super long. All I basically did here was copy that passage and paste it here, which is no good. If I want to read the story, I'll just read the story. If you're just going to recopy the story for me, I might as well just read the original story. So, that does not work. Instead, let's see here. Gotta switch over to this. Maybe. All right, so that's wrong. There we go. All right, let's take a look at another example here. It's the same passage. The seventh man appeared to be in his mid-50s. He was a tall, thin man with a mustache, and next to his right eye had a short but deep-looking scar that could have been made by the stab of a small blade. All right, so that's still our passage. But now look at the different way in which I did this. The seventh man looked like he was in his mid-50s. Okay? I took this idea of in his mid-50s, and that's the only idea I carry down into my quotation. Okay? And my sentence runs directly into my quotation, and they integrate, right? They're going together. I'm mixing my sentence with the quotation passage. All right? Okay. Also, it's very short. I'm only using a couple of words. I can continue to do this skill here, right? He also had a mysterious short but deep-looking scar near his eye. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. I picked 5 words: a short but deep-looking scar, and a short but deep-looking scar. And it's integrated. My words, the quotation, my words. And so I've got it perfectly mixed in. There's no period here. It's not an end. It goes seamlessly and smoothly. It just joins together. So that's what we are aiming for. That's what we want to see happen. I'm using short little parts of the story. Right? I'm using just some short little parts. to use for my quotation integration. Okay, short passages fully integrated into my sentences. I do not want separate sentences. All right, let's look at yet another example here. All right, again, at the top, I'm just using the example, the passage there. At the bottom is the writing example that we are studying here. So, describe K might be the job that you as the writer are given. I was kind of big and athletic, and the other kids all looked up to me. But the main reasons I enjoyed spending time with K was that he was such a sweet, pure-hearted boy. He was not the least bit retarded, but because of his impediment, he didn't do too well at school. So, as some might write, okay, K was nice and smart, which is some good analysis. He was a good friend. Okay, that's some good analysis. But look, now we have this harsh cut, this harsh break. They don't go together. Sentence ends, sentence begins. They are not integrated. Okay, but the main reason I enjoyed spending time with Kay was that he was such a sweet, pure-hearted boy. He was not the least bit retarded, but because of his impediment, he did not do well at school. So you'll notice that I did not use this part, which is probably pretty good because that has nothing to do with the question. Okay. But still, I'm using a ton of text, and I just don't need to use all that text. It's not necessary. It's too much. Just get to the quick point. I don't need all these extra words that are unnecessary. So, that is incorrect. I don't want that. I don't want a sentence that ends with a large chunk of text behind it. It's not how we do this. Okay, so as I was just saying, I crossed out stuff that's irrelevant to this. It's just not a part of it, right? The big answer to this question when you describe K is that he was a sweet and pure-hearted boy. That's the big one. Sweet, pure-hearted. Sweet, pure-hearted. Those are the big ideas. So, in another example, the seventh man's best friend was K. That's just me writing. K was A. That's just me writing. Sweet, pure-hearted boy. Boom. Right? That's from the text. That's why I got my quotations around it. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4 words. Okay, I got my quotation here. It's seamless. My words go directly into the story and continue here, right? My words. It's integrated. It goes together. It brings it together. We want to integrate my sentence and the quote. What we do not want is a harsh break between. All right, and I continue. K was a sweet, pure-hearted boy, but he did have a speech impediment that made school difficult for him. Look how I changed the words. He didn't do too well at school, and I changed it to it made school difficult for him. It's the same idea, which is fine, but I'm trying to focus on just a very specific idea. So I just took the word impediment. I added the idea of speech impediment, right? So I just use one word here. Now, this sentence is kind of cool because I actually have 2 quotations in it, right? I use 2 parts. Sweet, pure-hearted boy, blah, 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 impediment. And yet mine is all one sentence. It starts here and it ends here, which is fine. This is just a little bit more complex where I write, I use my quote, I write, I use my quote, I write. But read it. It's one sentence. You can't even hear a break in the ideas. K was a sweet, pure-hearted boy, but he did have a speech impediment that made school difficult for him. One complete, solid sentence that goes together, short little passages from the text, integrated and woven into my sentence. Okay? All right, let's erase this. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. I think we have one more example to walk through, and then we're going to practice. All right, conflict. What is one type of conflict in this story? The story was a big problem for the characters. Actually, that's a typo. Haha. It should be the storm. Whoop. Whoops. The storm was a big problem for the characters. Just after noon, the color of the sky began to change all of a sudden. There was something strange and unreal about it. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, it all might actually be really good talking about the storm, but we have a big cut, a big break here, and frankly, I just don't need this much of a quotation. That's no good. I want to make it short and sweet right now. I want to just focus on the most important elements, the biggest ideas. Okay? So that is an incorrect use of quotation. All right. So let's look at this. First of all, again, sorry, it should be storm, not story. Now it's not going to let me edit. Well then, you'll just have to forgive me my mistake. Storm. All right. So first of all, the storm was a big problem for the characters. That doesn't actually answer the question. What is one type of conflict? I did not say what the conflict was. So right off the bat, my paragraph is wrong because I don't answer the question. Okay. But then, look, I started cutting out stuff that doesn't even have anything to do with it, right? I don't need all of this stuff. All right, so I need to answer the question. Always answer the question. And then use the best text to support your answer. The best text. That might mean getting rid of stuff. It might be good stuff, but it might not be the best stuff. And if you feel that it's really so important, that's fine. Write 2 sentences or 2 paragraphs and use your evidence in those sentences or paragraphs. That's fine, but you still have to follow the rules of integration. You still got to bring them together. Okay? All right, so let's look at this. One of the types of conflict in this story is character versus nature. Right? So now I have explained my answer. The 7th man describes how the wind began to howl and the rain began to beat against the house. My sentence flows directly into my quotation. He also describes how the story was blowing. Storm. Why did I? Man, storm. I am sorry. It's like I did that every single time. Maybe there's some sort of autocorrect that I just didn't notice. Let's hope that's what it was. He also describes how the storm was blowing roofs off of houses and capsizing ships. So again, my words perfectly integrated with quotation. The typhoon he lived through was definitely causing trouble for all the people. So now I just kind of end with a little bit of analysis, kind of explaining the situation. So, one of the types of conflict in this story is character versus nature. The 7th man describes how the wind began to howl and the rain began to beat against the house. And actually, personally, that's kind of a long passage. It works, it's not bad, but it's a little bit longer than I would like to see. But it's okay. He also describes how the storm was blowing roofs off of houses and capsizing ships. The typhoon he lived through was definitely causing trouble for all the people living in this area of Japan. So now I've explained the question, I've answered the question. What type of conflict is it? It's character versus nature. I explained how the wind wasn't raining, but the wind was howling, but it wasn't raining. The wind was blowing roofs off, capsizing ships. And if you read in the story, it continues and says how some people were even killed. So I could have used that if I wanted, but I think I answered the question here pretty well. Okay? Short passages, fully integrated. All right, so check. I can use this skill for any kind of question that I'm asked. If I'm asked about the mood, I can look in the mood. Let's see here. The mood. I had this passage just a moment ago. Well, let's see here. Well, whatever. Mood, personification, supernatural conflict, imagery, whatever it is that I want to talk about, I can use a quotation to support that. So if me as the teacher asks you as the student to please identify an example personification, don't just simply write the example, explain it using the quotation, right? This is an example personification. You can see that the wave becomes like a person because the hand and the eye, blah, 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 right? You want to use the text. So whatever it is, you can use the text to support your answer. And again, that's why you can use this in your science, your math, your history, your dance classes. Because it doesn't matter what the text is, the skill is still the same. What does the story say? How can you explain it in your own words using the text as your evidence? All right, so let's go ahead and end with this idea of fear and the idea of fear. It's kind of one of the themes that we get at the end. So, here are 3 passages from the text, and then I realized that the deep darkness inside me had vanished, suddenly as it had come. And then a little bit later you get, but I was not afraid, no, not at all. There was no longer anything for me to fear. Those days were gone. And lastly, very end of the story. But the most frightening thing we can do at such times is to turn our back on it, to close our eyes, for then we take the most precious thing inside us and surrender it to something else. So, 3 passages. So let's go ahead and see if we can work on this together. So, all right, good. This is going to work. And then I realized that the deep darkness inside me had vanished, suddenly as it had come. So we know that the 7th man was completely frozen with fear. In fact, he lived most of his adult life in fear. He never married because of the nightmares, and he would wake up all sweaty. He had a few friends, but he mostly kind of stayed home, and he always avoided the ocean, and he never flew. So we know that fear controlled his life. For a while, fear had controlled the 7th man. He had a deep darkness inside him that prevented him from living fully. Right? But after he finds Kay's watercolor paintings, he begins to feel let's see here, what does he begin to feel? After he finds Kay's watercolor paintings, he begins to feel he begins to feel safe. Let's say safe because we're comparing that with fear. He begins to feel safe. In fact, his fear leaves him as suddenly as it had come. Okay? So the reason why I'm doing this live and is because I want you to see the writing process. I have to think about the right words. I have to write, delete, think, write again. This was on purpose. I didn't write the sentence ahead of time. I did not have it prepared. I had to think about it. I had to go through the process. But even still, look, my words, my analysis, my words, and then we get here the integrated quote, right? And then my words and my analysis, my words, my analysis, my words, my analysis, my words, my analysis, and an integrated quote, right? So I think that one works. And we only have 2 words here for the deep darkness. And then as suddenly as it had come, it's a very short little passage there. So I meet both of my requirements. It's woven together. It's integrated into my sentences. They are not separated. Okay, they're together. And my passages are pretty short. Okay, I'm going to do one more practice here, live, so to speak. So let's see here if I can do this. All right. So here's the second passage that we looked at just a moment ago. But I was not afraid. No, not at all. There was no longer anything for me to fear. Those days were gone. So this is after the seventh man returns to his home town. He begins to feel better. He realizes that K was not mad at him. K did not blame him. It was a tragedy, but not his own fault. I could say realizes again, but I already said realizes. I don't like repeating the same word. So we could say he realizes, but I might say with he thinks, or he considers, but he thinks. I don't know. I'm not sure I like that. I might come back and change that. But he thinks. Let's see here. Thinks there was no longer anything for him to fear. All right, so I am using this passage here, right? That's the sentence I'm using. I am using most of the sentence, but it's a pretty short sentence, so I think it still works. I still don't like the word thinks here. Let's see here. He realizes, he thinks, he considers, he... Maybe we'll go with recognizes. I like recognizes. Okay, now, last thing I want to point out here is I used these brackets and I used him. If you look at the quotation, it says for me, the word is me, but I can't write for me here because it's just wrong. The pronoun case would be wrong. Because it starts with he, and I am writing it, he recognizes there was no longer anything for me to fear. Well, he and me, those are different people. And so it's confusing, and I have to make sure that my pronouns agree with one another. So, because Mr. de Klerk is writing this, I am going to speak about him as the he. So here, when it says me in the first person, I need to change that to the third person. Confusing, I know. So what the bracket means is I'm changing the word to fit the sentence, but it's the same exact idea. That's what these brackets say. These brackets say this is the same exact idea. I just had to adjust the word a tiny little bit in order for it to make grammatical sense. Because if I put me here, it doesn't make sense because the he and the me would conflict. It doesn't make sense. So I make it he and him to smooth it out, and it makes sense. But I change the quote because quotes are exact words, right? Quotations say these are the exact words from the text. I am not copying or plagiarizing. They are someone else's words. But I had to change the words a little bit. Okay? Those brackets make it okay. That's a little bit more complex than I was planning to get into, but the point remains this. I wrote this, and then I integrated my quotation into my sentence. Okay? All right. I know it's kind of a lot to take in. I'm going to post this passage here, and I want you to integrate it. Don't use the whole thing. Remember, use just a few parts of the words, explain it, use the most important ideas, and integrate it into your sentence. Okay? As we talked about before, it should be more of your writing than what you take from the story. So your sentence should be mostly you with a little bit of the seventh man. And you can write 2 sentences if you need to or want to, depending on how you set it up. Look, this is not a mathematical equation. There's not only one right way to do this. There are 1,000 different ways for you to write a sentence using this quotation and talking about this idea. So just to review, we're talking for this last one, we're talking about this idea of fear. So what is the seventh man's big idea? What is he trying to tell us about fear? What is the important idea for fear? So I want you, and I'll post this question, I want you to think about how you can explain this idea of fear and what is the big idea, the important idea, using this quotation. Okay? All right, I think that covers it. If you have questions, please reach out. We've practiced. We're going to keep practicing. This is a tough skill to master, a tough skill to learn. So if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. All right, you guys, that's all for now. All right, talk to you later. Bye-bye.